Imagine this. You are in a high-stakes environment. Maybe it's your workplace, a social circle, or a competitive project. You've been taught that being good, transparent, and loyal are the keys to success. You believe that if you treat people well, they will return the favor. But then it happens. You are sidelined. Someone you trusted uses your own honesty against you. You realize, with a sinking feeling in your chest, that while you were playing a game of ethics, they were playing a game of power. Most people find this realization terrifying. They retreat into bitterness or hide behind a mask of moral superiority. But the few who possess an emperor mind do something else. They study the map. 5 centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli wrote The Prince. It wasn't meant to be an evil book. It was meant to be a mirror that reflects the world not as it should be, but as it is. In this video, we aren't just summarizing an old text. We are performing a psychological autopsy on power. We are going to see why your current morality might be your greatest liability and how you can transform your mindset to finally start winning the games you didn't even know you were playing. If you are ready to stop being a pawn and start becoming the player, stay with me. Because once you see these truths, you can never go back to the illusions of the past. Now we have to talk about the hardest mountain any man can climb, the moment you decide to rely entirely on yourself. Machiavelli makes a profound distinction in the 6th chapter that most people today completely misunderstand. He talks about those who become princes through their own virtue, which doesn't mean being a good person in the modern sense, but rather having the raw skill, grit, and mental fortitude to bend reality to their will. Think about the goals you've set for yourself. Machiavelli tells us that those who rise through their own ability find it incredibly difficult to reach the top. But once they are there, they stay there with ease. Why? Because the struggle itself is the training. When you build your own business, your own body, or your own mindset from zero, you aren't just gaining a result, you are gaining the infrastructure to protect that result. You become like the great founders he mentions, Cyrus or Romulus, who succeeded because they were armed and ready to enforce their new vision. The lesson for you is simple. Stop looking for the shortcut. The difficulty you are facing right now isn't a sign that you are failing. It is the process of building the roots that will keep you standing when the wind starts to howl. But then, Machiavelli takes us into darker territory in chapter 7, and this is where most people get caught in a trap. He talks about those who rise through fortune, through luck, through their parents' money, or through the favor of others. These people, he says, fly to the top as if they have wings, but the moment they land, they realize they have no idea how to walk. They are like trees that grow too fast. They lack the deep roots necessary to survive the first storm that hits them. Ask yourself, are you building your life on the shifting sands of someone else's approval or on the solid rock of your own competence? If your success depends on a lucky algorithm or a boss who likes you today, you aren't an emperor. You're a hostage to fortune. Machiavelli uses the example of Cesare Borgia, a man who did everything right but ultimately failed because he relied on the power of his father, the Pope. The second that support was gone, his empire crumbled. This is a warning for us in the 21st century. If you didn't build the foundation yourself, you don't really own the building. Before we get into the brutal logic of Chapter 8, how to handle the necessary cruelties of life, I want to pause for a second. Look at what we're doing here. While the rest of the world is drowning in dopamine and short-term distractions, you are here, deep in the trenches of 16th century political philosophy. That shows a level of discipline that 99% of people simply don't have. You're developing what we call the emperor mind. Honestly, I'm proud of this community. We're not just reading books, we're sharpening our blades. So if you haven't already, join the Legion and hit that subscribe button. The surgical strike, the logic of decisiveness. Let's move into one of the most controversial chapters in the entire book, Chapter 8, where Machiavelli discusses those who obtain power through wickedness. He tells the story of Agathocles of Sicily, a man who rose from being a potter's son to the king of Syracuse by simply eliminating everyone in his way. Now, Machiavelli doesn't call this virtue. He says you can gain power this way, but not glory. But here is the practical, real-world takeaway for you. Machiavelli observes that cruelties can be either well-used or badly used. A well-used cruelty is one that is done all at once, out of necessity, to secure your position and then never repeated. In your life, this translates to decisiveness. When you have to make a hard choice, leaving a friend group that holds you back, cutting off a toxic family member, or firing a client, you must do it cleanly once and move on. If you hesitate, if you are kind but inconsistent, you create a lingering wound that never heals. You become a badly used leader who has to be cruel every day just to keep things from falling apart. The Civil Principality, the Power of the People, Chapter 9. Finally, we look at the civil principality in Chapter 9. This is where a private citizen becomes a leader through the favor of his fellow citizens. Machiavelli gives us a masterclass in social dynamics here. He says there are two groups in every city: the great, the elite who want to command, and the people, the masses who just don't want to be oppressed. He gives us a cold, calculated piece of advice. It is better to have the people on your side than the great. Why? Because the great will always see themselves as your equals. They will envy you and try to subvert you the moment you show weakness. But the people? They only want security. If you protect them, they will be loyal to you because their needs are simpler. In your own life, this means don't spend all your energy trying to impress the elites in your industry or the cool crowd in your social circle. They are your competitors. Instead, build a foundation with the people who actually support your work and your mission. If you have the people behind you, your community, your true supporters, the great cannot touch you. An emperor mind doesn't seek the approval of rivals. It builds a fortress of loyalty with those who value what it provides. The Measure of a Man. Can you stand alone? Chapter 10. Moving into Chapter 10, Machiavelli asks a question that strikes at the very heart of your personal independence. Can you stand on your own 2 feet, or do you always need a wall to lean on? He distinguishes between those who have enough resources and virtù to lead an army against any challenger, and those who have to hide behind the fortifications of others. In our world, this isn't about castle walls. It's about your emotional and financial infrastructure. Most people are fortified by external things: their job title, their social status, or the approval of their peers. But what happens when the siege begins? What happens when the market crashes, the relationship ends, or the crowd turns against you? Machiavelli's advice is to focus on the well-fortified city. He praises German cities of his time because they had the discipline to store a year's worth of food, fuel, and work for their people. The takeaway for an emperor mind is that true power is self-contained. If you are constantly looking for outside validation or help, you are vulnerable. You need to build a life where, if everything else was stripped away, you still have the provisions inside your own mind to survive the winter. Ask yourself, if the external world stopped cheering for you today, would you still have a reason to keep going? Those who can answer yes are the only ones who are truly free. The Invisible Fortress, Power Beyond Logic, Chapter 11. Then we encounter one of the most unique forms of power, the ecclesiastical principalities, or what we can call institutional authority. Machiavelli notes with a bit of irony that these states are the only ones that are secure and happy. They aren't defended by armies, yet they aren't taken. They aren't governed, yet the people don't care. Why? Because they are sustained by ancient religious ordinances and a power that transcends human logic. In modern terms, this is the power of a legendary brand or a fixed reputation. Think about the people or companies that seem untouchable. They don't have to fight for attention anymore because their authority is divine in the eyes of the public. They have reached a level where their name alone does the work for them. But how do you get there? You don't start with the crown. You start with the discipline we've been talking about. You build a character so consistent and an emperor mind so unshakable that eventually you become an institution yourself. People stop questioning you because your presence alone suggests a history of winning. You want to move from being someone who fights for power to someone who is power. The Mercenary Trap: Why You Can't Outsource Strength, Chapter 12. This brings us to one of the most vital warnings in the entire book. In Chapter 12, Machiavelli talks about the foundation of every state, good laws and good arms. He warns that you can never, under any circumstances, rely on mercenaries or auxiliary troops. He calls them useless and dangerous because they are ambitious, undisciplined, and unfaithful. They have no motive to stay on the battlefield except for a small wage, which is never enough to make them want to die for you. Think about this in your life. How many of you are outsourcing your happiness or your success to mercenaries? Maybe it's a coach you pay but don't actually listen to, or a friend group you buy with favors, or even an AI tool you use to do the thinking you should be doing yourself. When things get tough, these external crutches will desert you. They don't have skin in the game. Machiavelli says that the ruin of Italy in his time was caused by relying on mercenary armies for years. The lesson is clear. If the strength doesn't come from within you, from your own arms, your own skills, and your own sweat, it isn't real strength. It's just a borrowed illusion. The Mindset of Constant Preparation, Chapter 14. Machiavelli now takes us away from the structure of the state and places us directly into the mind of the leader. He tells us that a prince should have no other object or thought, nor pick up any other profession, but the study of war, its organization, and its discipline. He warns that the first cause of losing your power is neglecting this art, while the way to acquire power is to be a master of it. But let's bring this into your daily life. Most people think they can relax once they achieve a bit of success. They reach a certain income or a certain status and they switch off. Machiavelli would call this a fatal error. He says that in times of peace, the mind must be even more active than in times of war. You should be hunting, not just for animals, but for knowledge. You should be studying the terrain of your industry, identifying the mountains and valleys of your competition, and constantly running simulations in your head of what you would do if everything went wrong. An emperor mind never truly rests. It simply switches from active combat to strategic preparation. If you aren't sharpening your blade when it's quiet, it will be blunt when the battle inevitably returns. The Shattering of Illusions, Realism over Idealism, Chapter 15. Now we arrive at the turning point of the entire book. Machiavelli essentially apologizes for being so blunt, but he explains that he wants to write something useful for those who understand reality. He says that many people have imagined republics and principalities that have never been seen or known to exist in truth. This is a direct attack on the wishful thinking that destroys so many lives today. We are told to be perfect, to be altruistic, and to always take the high road. But Machiavelli argues that a man who wants to act virtuously in every way will necessarily come to ruin among so many who are not virtuous. He isn't telling you to be evil, he is telling you to learn how not to be good when the situation requires it. Think about the nice guy in the office who gets passed over for the promotion because he didn't want to play politics, or the person who gets walked over in a relationship because they are afraid to set a boundary. They are living in an imagined world. The emperor mind accepts the world as it is, raw, competitive, and often unfair, and learns the rules of that world so it can protect what matters. You cannot win a game if you are playing by a set of rules that your opponents are ignoring. The Trap of Generosity, Why Being Nice Will Bankrupt You, Chapter 16. Building on this realism, Machiavelli looks at liberality, or what we would call being generous. On the surface, being known as a generous person sounds like a good thing, but Machiavelli warns that if you practice your generosity in a way that the world notices, it will consume your resources. Eventually, you will run out of favors to give or money to spend, and you will be forced to become greedy just to survive. The result? The people who benefited from your generosity won't remember the help. They will only resent you for stopping. You see this in friendships where one person always pays, or in businesses that give too many discounts. You train people to expect your kindness as a right, not a privilege. Machiavelli argues it is much wiser to be seen as parsimonious or frugal. If you are careful with your resources, your time, your energy, and your money, you will always have enough to defend yourself and your empire. In the long run, your stability will be seen as a greater generosity to your people than the short-term high of a handout. The ultimate question, is it better to be loved or feared? Chapter 17. This leads us to the most famous debate in the history of power. Machiavelli asks, is it better to be loved than feared, or vice versa? His answer is a cold, calculated masterpiece. Ideally, he says, you would be both, but since that is nearly impossible to achieve, it is much safer to be feared than loved. Why? Because love is a chain of obligation which men, being selfish, break whenever it serves them. But fear is maintained by a dread of punishment that never fails. Apply this to your own leadership. If you rely on people liking you to get things done, you are at the mercy of their moods and their convenience. The moment they are tired or find a better offer, their love for you will vanish. But if they respect and fear the consequences of letting you down, whether that's losing their job, losing your respect, or facing a clear boundary, they will stay disciplined. However, Machiavelli adds a vital caveat. A leader must be feared, but he must never be hated. To be hated is a strategic failure because it turns everyone into a conspirator against you. How do you avoid hate? By staying away from people's property and their personal lives. In a modern context, this means be firm, be demanding, and have high standards. But be fair. Don't be a petty tyrant. An emperor mind uses fear like a precision tool, not a blunt club. The Art of Deception, The Lion and the Fox, Chapter 18. Finally, we look at how a leader should keep their word. Machiavelli admits that it is praiseworthy to live with integrity, but he points out that the great leaders of history are the ones who knew how to circumvent the intellect of men by craft. He introduces the famous imagery of the lion and the fox. The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot protect himself from wolves. Therefore, you must be a fox to recognize the traps and a lion to frighten the wolves. In your life, being a lion means having the strength to stand your ground and the courage to take action. But being a fox is about social intelligence. It's about knowing when someone is trying to manipulate you and knowing when it's better to hide your true intentions. Machiavelli says that a prudent leader cannot and should not keep his word when doing so would be to his disadvantage. This isn't an excuse to be a liar. It's a reminder that you are living in a world of beasts, and you must be equipped to handle them. You should appear to be all mercy, all faith, all integrity, but inside you must be prepared to do what is necessary to survive and thrive. The emperor mind is a master of its own mask. It knows that the ultimate goal is not to be right, but to win the long game. The Untouchable Reputation, Avoiding the Fatal Flaws, Chapter 19. Machiavelli now dives into the most dangerous territory for any leader, the loss of respect. He argues that while being feared is useful, being despised or hated is a death sentence. You become despised when you are seen as changeable, frivolous, effeminate, or irresolute. Essentially, if people think you are weak or that you don't stand for anything, they will eventually stop following you. In your personal life, this is about consistency. If you are constantly changing your mind, breaking your promises, or letting your emotions dictate your actions, you are eroding your emperor mind foundation. To avoid this, Machiavelli says you must strive to make your actions show greatness, courage, gravity, and fortitude. You want people to know that when you make a decision, it is final and cannot be easily challenged. He also gives a very practical tip. Stay out of people's personal business and don't take what belongs to them. In a modern context, this means respecting boundaries. Don't be the person who meddles in everyone's drama or tries to take credit for other people's work. By staying above the fray, you maintain a level of mystery and authority that makes you untouchable. Building your inner fortress, the tools of stability. Chapter 20. In Chapter 20, Machiavelli looks at the technical side of power, things like building fortresses, arming your subjects, or creating factions. He makes a fascinating observation. New leaders often arm their people because it makes those people loyal and your own. But if you disarm them, you show that you distrust them, and distrust breeds hatred. The psychological takeaway here is about empowerment. If you are a leader, whether in a business, a family, or a community, the best way to secure your position is not to micromanage and disarm the people under you. Instead, you should give them the tools to succeed. When they feel that their strength comes from your leadership, they become your most loyal defenders. However, Machiavelli's most profound point in this chapter is that the best fortress any man can have is not to be hated by his people. You can build the most expensive security system, have the biggest bank account, and the best PR team. But if the people around you truly despise you, those walls will eventually crumble from the inside. Your true security lies in the quality of your character and the respect you command, not in the physical barriers you build between yourself and the world. The spectacle of greatness, how to gain reverence. Chapter 21. How does a person go from being just another guy to being a figure of reverence? Machiavelli says nothing makes a prince so much esteemed as great enterprises and setting a fine example. He talks about King Ferdinand of Aragon, who kept his people in a state of suspense and admiration by always being involved in big, ambitious projects. For you, this means you must always be moving toward a higher goal. An emperor mind doesn't sit still. You should always have a great enterprise in the works. Whether it's a new business venture, a physical transformation, or mastering a difficult skill. When people see you constantly evolving and tackling big challenges, they can't help but respect you. Machiavelli also gives some of the best advice on social dynamics. Never stay neutral. He says that if two of your neighbors go to war, you must pick a side. If you stay neutral, you become the prey of the winner, and the loser will not help you because you didn't stand with them when they needed it. In life, people who try to play both sides end up being trusted by no one. Have the courage to take a stand. Even if you pick the wrong side, people will respect your decisiveness more than they will ever respect a fence-sitter. The Emperor's Counsel, Choosing the Right Circle, chapters 22 to 23. Finally, we look at the people you surround yourself with. Machiavelli says that the first opinion one forms of a leader's intelligence is based on the quality of the men he has around him. There are three types of minds. Those who understand things by themselves, those who understand what others show them, and those who understand nothing at all. You want to be the first, but you must at least be the second. He warns specifically against flatterers. The world is full of people who will tell you what you want to hear just to stay in your good graces. Machiavelli says the only way to guard yourself against flattery is by letting men know that telling you the truth does not offend you. But here's the catch. If everyone can tell you the truth at any time, you lose respect. So you must choose a few wise advisors and give only them the liberty to speak the truth to you, and only when you ask for it. In your life, this means having a very small inner circle of people who are allowed to check your ego. Everyone else sees the emperor, but these few see the man. If you don't have people who can tell you when you're being an idiot, you are on the fast track to ruin. Taming the Goddess of Luck. Mastering Your Fate, chapters 24 to 25. As we reach the conclusion, Machiavelli addresses the one thing we all fear, luck, or, as he calls it, fortune. He acknowledges that many people believe the world is governed by fortune and God, and that there's no point in trying to change anything, but he disagrees. He says that fortune is like a violent river that, when it's angry, floods the plains and destroys everything. However, when the weather is calm, men can build dams and dikes so that when the river rises again, it is diverted into channels, and its force is not so uncontrolled. This is the essence of the emperor mind. You cannot control when the flood, a crisis, will come, but you can spend your peaceful days building the mental, financial, and physical dams that will protect you when it does. He ends with a famous, bold statement. Fortune is a woman, and if you wish to keep her under, it is necessary to beat and ill-use her. He argues that fortune is a friend to the young and the impetuous, those who are bold, aggressive, and willing to take risks, rather than those who are overly cautious. The world rewards the man who acts. If you wait for the perfect moment, you are letting fortune lead you. If you act with virtù and boldness, you lead fortune. Most people will finish this video, close the tab, and go right back to the world of illusions. They will continue to be surprised when people betray them, and they will continue to complain that the world isn't fair. But you are different. You've stayed until the end, which means you've developed the stomach for the truth. You've looked into Machiavelli's mirror and realized that power isn't a dirty word, it's a responsibility. Whether you are leading a company, a family, or just your own life, you now have the psychological blueprint to stop being a pawn and start becoming the player. The emperor mind isn't about being a tyrant, it's about the absolute mastery of yourself so that the world cannot master you. It's about knowing when to be the lion, when to be the fox, and when to let your silence do the talking for you. We are building something real here, a community of people who value the cold truth over a comfortable lie. If that sounds like the circle you belong in, hit that subscribe button and join the Emperor Mind Legion. You've earned your seat at the table today just by listening. And remember, Machiavelli said fortune is a woman that must be handled with boldness, so don't wait for your life to change. Go out there and change it yourself, because if you don't build your own empire, I promise you, someone else will hire you to build theirs. Now, I want to hear from you. When was the last time you remained silent when everyone expected you to speak? How did it change the power in that room? Tell me in the comments. And if you're ready to take this even deeper, the next video is already waiting for you. Don't stop now. Your empire is just beginning.